Well, the dailies is where we're going next, and just like we always do, we need to review the papers and see what they have on their major, or rather, on the front pages of their dailies. Now, to review, we have 5 papers for review today. We have the Punch, the Vanguard, This Day, the Nation, and also the Guardian to guide us through. But to start, let's see if we start with the Punch, as usual, and see if the Punch has a major one. And on the Punch this morning, it seems to be a major indeed. Nupeng vs Dangote union insists on strike, needs federal government orders today. And just take a rider because of time. Labour Minister begs union to shelve industrial action. But I'll tell you not to shelve that story, but continue more of that story on page 21 of the Punch newspaper. Let's quickly go to the top mass of the Punch and see if we have other major leading stories. Lending rate may fall as inflation eases, and this is credited to the Central Bank of Nigeria. But I'll tell you, page 30 has the story. Accountant General plots to preempt a Supreme Court set to pay Osun local government funds to cut sacked APC chairman. And Councillor Norgay cries out. But I'll tell you, don't cry on that story, but we'll go read it on page 9. Let's see if we take some other leading stories at the side mass of the Punch. Natasha to resume Senate after London trip. This is accredited to the lawyer of page 14. Naira strengthens to 1,514 Naira per dollar. Yes, 5-month high. And you can get more of that story on page 23. But one that seems to be more of an advert is Leadway Holdings announced acquisition of PAL pension. And I'll just tell you, get that story on page 28. The picture of the day is that very sad incident that played out a day before yesterday in Ukraine as Russia attacked at the first Ukraine government building. And indeed, it looks as if the war is not going to end anytime soon. But anyway, that's the end of the Punch. Next, we definitely have to go on.
Let's see what the nation has for us this morning. The major story here reads, troops hit terrorists in nationwide crackdown. And the rider states, bandits commander, others killed. Well, you can read more of that story on page 2 of the Nation newspaper. Let's see if we have more. Just right at the top of the top story, new customs duty exemption rate takes off. That's on page 9. Minister to meet Nupeng and others. That's on page 4 at the top mass. Why Lagos, Abuja top destinations for FDI. That's on page 19 of the paper. Naira rallies on sustained forex growth. Well, that's on page 2 of the paper. United Airlines acquires 6 Boeing 737-800 aircraft. That's on page 4. Blackout enters 2 weeks in parts of Benin. That's on page 6 of the paper. Let's see what we have at the side mass. No need for strike during talks. Education Minister tells ASU and ASOP. Well, that's on page 4. Kado saw why CBN will sustain monetary tightening policy. That's on page 2 of the paper. INEC's recognition of Gabam-led ESCO throws SDP into confusion. Well, that's on page 5 of the paper. And the picture of the day is that of an official of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, that is the NDLEA, inspecting drugs at the West African Container Terminal, the WACT, at Port Harcourt Ports Complex. Well, that's all we're taking this morning on the Nation newspaper. Let's see what this day has for us today. The major story reads, El Rufai, there are now more poor Nigerians than 1960 population. Let's take one rider to the story. The cries persistent low voter turnout seeks true federalism. Well, if you want to read more on that, you can go to page 5 of the paper. Let's see what we have. A federal government calls for a truce as Nupeng vows to embark on strike today over disputes with Dangote. And the rider says petrol retailers declare shutdown for Tuesday. Well, you can read more of that on page 5 of the paper. At the top mass, NULGE, AGF plotting to preempt Supreme Court set to pay Osun local government funds to APC chairs. A councillor sacked by court. Well, you can read that story on page 5 of this day newspaper. Let's see the picture of the day. Yes, it's that of the 80th birthday Thanksgiving of the presiding Bishop of Trem, that's Bishop Mike Okonkwo. Well, happy birthday to Bishop Mike Okonkwo. That's all we're taking this morning on this day newspaper. Let's see what the Guardian has for us this morning. Yeah, the major story here reads, National Grid faces 5.6 trillion revenue loss as premium customers exit. Well, that's on page 6 of the paper. At the top mass, Dangote Nupeng face-off. A federal government urges a caution. That's on page 3. Sowore CSOs push back as DSS asks X to delete anti-Tinubu tweets. Well, that's on page 3 of the paper. Customs exempt $300 parcels from tax as cargo owners decry duty payments disruption. Well, that's on page 4 of the paper. Let's go to the side mass. Mayhem as thugs invade rally for Obi Roads Vival in Lagos. Well, that's on page 5 of the paper. Prominent Nigerians push for electoral reforms ahead of 2027 polls. That's on page 29 of the paper. Insecurity, Northern leaders demand state of emergency. A sack of service chiefs. That's on page 6 of the paper. Army neutralizes 4 terrorists, arrests 64 suspects in nationwide operations. That's on page 8. Parents gone as schools resume. Imo outlaws some practices. That's on page 29 of the paper. Leadway Holdings announces acquisition of PAL pensions. Well, that's on page 18 of the paper. And the graph of the day, it's titled Invoice Settlements in Power Sector Subsidies Overview, and it explains why the national grid faces a 5.6 trillion naira revenue loss as premium customers exit. Well, that's all we're taking this morning on the Guardian newspaper. Up next is the Vanguard.
And on the Vanguard, the leading story reads, Dangote Nupeng face-off, federal government moves to avert nationwide strike. Riders to that says someone's fielding parties to emergency meeting today. But I'll tell you to get more of that story on page 5. DD Microfinance Bank, how we turned deficit to big balance sheet, and this is accredited to Enajomo Isere, and you can get that on page 15. United Nations article being Dime, rage over killing of 63 in Brno, demand probe as Governor Zulum visit affected communities, and I can tell you to visit more of that story on page 13. NLC, federal government workers demand minimum wage, and more of that demand is on page 9. But let's see if we take some other leading story just at the side side of the Vanguard. As we take more. 2026 World Cup Osimhen out of South Africa clash. A sad one for Nigerians, but I know South Africans are cheering. Local government funds, Oshun Norgay wants OAGF, and CBN overplot to preempt Supreme Court judgments, and you can get more on page 10. Interest rate, manufacturers look beyond banks for survival is another major one on page 23, and you can get all that story right there on it. And let's just see the picture of the day is that of more of the business, and you can get all that dignitaries right there, and you can see more as it concerns promoting Nigerian European trade, investment, and exchange, and that's that very one on the picture of the day. But that's much you can take from the dailies this morning. You do know we always implore you to go grab a copy of the dailies, read up, and get informed, because all you do, an informed mind is not a deformed one.